The metal chains felt cold against Commander Jae-won Kim's wrists as he stood in the center of the massive courtroom. Above him, 3 alien heads looked down from a towering platform made of crystal and silver. Each head belonged to a different species. The middle one had 6 eyes that glowed blue. The left head looked like a giant bird with sharp teeth. The right head had no eyes at all, just smooth skin that seemed to move on its own. Behind Jae-won, 23 other humans waited in silence. Their chains clinked softly when they moved. Engineer Minji Park kept her head high even though her hands were shaking. Captain Soyeon Choi watched the alien guards with sharp eyes, already planning escape routes that would never come. Dr. Hyun-woo Nam studied the courtroom like he was still in his laboratory, trying to understand everything he saw. The courtroom was huge. Thousands of alien beings filled the seats around them. Some looked like walking trees with too many arms. Others floated in glass tanks filled with green liquid. A few had bodies made of what looked like living metal. All of them stared at the humans with hate, fear, or both. Jae-won had seen this look before. It was the same look wild animals gave when they were cornered. The same look his enemies had given him during the war on Mars. But this time the humans were the ones in chains. The middle judge spoke first. Its voice sounded like music played backwards. A small device on Jae-won's collar translated the words into Korean. Humans of the species called Homo sapiens. You stand accused of unprovoked violence against peaceful explorers of the Galactic Union. Jae-won wanted to laugh, but he kept his face blank. Peaceful explorers. That was what they called the alien ships that had attacked Earth's first space station. The ships that had killed 300 people before humanity even knew aliens existed. The bird-like judge took over. Its voice was high and sharp like breaking glass. Your species showed extreme aggression during first contact. When our diplomatic vessel approached your world, you destroyed it without warning or negotiation. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-yoon made a small noise behind him. She had been there during first contact. She knew the truth. The alien diplomatic vessel had been the size of a city and had started charging weapons the moment it entered Earth's solar system. Humanity had waited 6 hours before firing. 6 hours of trying to communicate while the aliens prepared to attack. But the tribunal did not want to hear the truth. They had already decided what humans were. The third judge had no mouth, but somehow its words filled the air around them. The translator struggled with the strange speech. Your species is too dangerous for normal imprisonment. Too violent for rehabilitation, too unpredictable for controlled containment. Engineer Dong-hyun Lee whispered something to technician Min Ho-jeon. The guards moved closer, but the humans were just sharing looks. They all knew this trial was fake. They had known from the moment they were captured. It had happened 3 months ago. The human exploration ship New Seoul had been mapping star systems near Earth when 12 alien vessels surrounded them. The aliens had better weapons, better shields, and better ships. But they had made one mistake. They had let the humans surrender instead of killing them immediately. Now Jae-won understood why that had been a mistake. The aliens needed this trial. They needed to show the galaxy that humans were monsters who deserved whatever was coming next. The middle judge stood up. All 6 of its blue eyes focused on Jae-won. Commander Kim Jae-won of the Human Military Forces. Your species has been found guilty of crimes against galactic peace. The sentence has been decided. The courtroom fell silent. Even the floating aliens in their tank stopped moving. Jae-won felt his crew tense behind him. Pilot Hansel Baek took a small step forward. Medic Seongjin Choi moved to protect Dr. Subin Kang. They were still acting like a unit, even in chains. The humans will be transported to the proving grounds, the judge announced. There, the galaxy's apex predators will decide your fate. No prisoner has ever returned from the proving grounds. Justice will be swift and final. A wave of excited sounds came from the alien audience. Some clicked their teeth. Others made humming noises. A few banged tentacles against their seats. They were happy. They thought they were watching the end of humanity's story. But Jae-won had heard of the proving grounds. Every military officer in the galaxy knew the stories. It was a massive biodome where the most dangerous creatures from every world were kept. Things that had destroyed entire planets. Monsters that ate starships. Predators so deadly that entire species had gone extinct trying to hunt them. The aliens thought they were sending humans to die. They thought they were solving their human problem by feeding them to something worse. Communications Officer Daeun Kim caught Jaewon's eye. She gave him the smallest nod. She understood too. They all did. The aliens had made a choice that would change everything. They just did not know it yet. As the guards moved forward to take them away, Jaewon looked up at the three judges one more time. The bird-like head was already turning away, bored now that the entertainment was over. The middle head watched with its 6 blue eyes, probably thinking about what to eat for lunch. The third head had no expression at all. None of them looked worried. None of them looked like leaders who had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The chains around Jaewon's wrists felt lighter now. Behind him, his crew was walking straighter. Engineer Taeyang Shin was already studying the design of their restraints. Sergeant Ji-won-oh was counting guards and exits. Supply Officer Gaeun Ryu was listening to alien conversations, picking up pieces of their language. They were not acting like prisoners anymore. They were acting like what they really were. Earth's finest soldiers, scientists, and explorers. People who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history because someone needed to go first. Someone needed to see what was out there in the dark between stars. The aliens thought they were looking at victims, but Jaewon knew better. The galaxy was about to meet something it had never seen before, something that had crawled out of a gravity well that crushed metal and survived ice ages that killed everything else. Something that had learned to work together because working alone meant death. The transport ship waited outside the courthouse. Through the windows, Jaewon could see stars he had never visited, worlds he would never explore. But that was okay. Where they were going, he would meet creatures from all of those worlds and more. The aliens had no idea what they had just done. They thought they were ending the human story. Instead, they were about to help it begin. The proving grounds were waiting. And so was something the galaxy had never seen before, something that would change everything. The dragons in their lair were about to meet their new masters. The transport ship dropped through the biodome's atmosphere like a falling stone. Through the small windows, Commander Jaewon Kim watched alien landscapes blur past. Purple forests mixed with silver deserts. Lakes of green liquid sat next to mountains that glowed with their own light. The air outside shimmered with colors that had no names. The dome was bigger than any city on Earth. It stretched beyond the horizon in every direction. Jaewon had read the files during their 3-day journey. The proving grounds contained pieces of 500 different worlds. Swamps from planets where the rain was acid. Ice fields from moons where the cold could freeze metal. Jungles from worlds where the plants ate anything that moved. And in every environment, something was hunting. Engineer Minji Park sat across from him, her face pressed to another window. She was counting structures and taking notes on a piece of cloth she had torn from her uniform. Even as a prisoner heading to certain death, she could not stop being an engineer. The dome has 17 different climate zones, she whispered to Engineer Donghyun Lee. Each zone is separated by energy barriers, but the barriers have gaps. Things can move between zones. Captain Soyeon Choi was listening to everything. Her military mind was already working on the problem. How do you survive in a place designed to kill everything that enters it? How do you stay alive when every other living thing wants you dead? The ship landed with a crash that rattled their bones. Through the speakers, an alien voice spoke in the musical language of the tribunal. The translator on Jaewon's collar turned the words into Korean. Prisoners will exit the transport. No equipment will be provided. No rescue will come. Death is the only escape from the proving grounds. The doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The first thing that hit them was the smell. It was like a zoo mixed with a battlefield mixed with a chemical factory. Sweet and sharp and wrong in ways that made their stomachs turn. The second thing was the heat. The air was thick and warm and full of moisture that felt oily on their skin. Dr. Hyunwoo Nam immediately started coughing. His lungs were not used to air that had never been breathed by humans. The third thing was the silence. In a place full of apex predators, Jaewon had expected noise. Roaring and screaming and the sounds of things dying. But the central clearing where they landed was quiet except for the hum of energy barriers and the distant sound of something large moving through water. They are watching us, Lieutenant Eun Ji-yoon said quietly. She was looking at the shadows between the trees, the way the light bent in places where nothing should be. Technician Min Ho-jeon was already studying the ground around them. Boot prints from other prisoners. Claw marks from things that had no names. Dark stains that could have been blood or acid or something worse. How many prisoners come here each year? Dr. Subin Kang asked. She was examining a piece of metal that might have been part of a weapon or a tool or a ship. The record said about 300. Communications Officer Dayun Kim answered. From 200 different species. And how many return? 0. The silence stretched longer. Above them, Jaewon knew, alien observers were watching from their safe ships. They had cameras and sensors recording everything. They were probably placing bets on how long the humans would last. Engineer Taeyang Shin walked to the edge of the clearing and knelt by one of the energy barriers. It was invisible except for a faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from hot stone. Beyond it, something moved in the purple forest, something big. The barriers use a frequency modulation pattern, he said. They are not walls. They are more like filters. Some things can pass through, others cannot. What determines what can pass through? Jaewon asked. I think it depends on the creature. Each species has a different energy signature. The barriers read the signature and decide. Pilot Hansel Beck was looking up at the dome's ceiling far overhead. It was made of the same crystal material as the courtroom, but stronger. Strong enough to contain atmosphere and gravity and things that could crack planets. The dome generates its own weather, he said. Look at the cloud patterns. They are not natural. Someone is controlling them. Navigator Yuna Lee was mapping their position using the stars visible through the crystal ceiling. We are in the exact center of the dome. All the climate zones are arranged around us in a circle, like spokes on a wheel. Medic Seongjin Choi found the first body 20 meters from where they landed. It had been a tall, thin creature with blue skin and 4 arms. Something had torn it apart so completely that pieces were scattered across 10 square meters of ground. How long has it been dead? Jaewon asked. Maybe 2 days. Maybe 3. It is hard to tell in this heat. Sergeant Ji Won-oh was examining the claw marks on nearby trees. They were deep enough to cut through wood that was harder than steel. Whatever had made them was strong enough to kill anything and fast enough to catch it. We need to move, Captain Soyeon Choi said. Staying in the open makes us targets. But Jaewon held up a hand for silence. Something was happening in the purple forest. The shadows were moving in ways that shadows should not move, and in the shimmer of the energy barrier, shapes were gathering. The first creature to show itself was the size of a small building. It had 6 legs and a shell that looked like black metal. Its head was mostly teeth, each one as long as Jaewon's arm. The files had called it a Vorthan devourer. They came from a world where everything was prey and nothing was safe. Behind it, more shapes moved. Things that bent light around them. Things that floated without wings. Things that looked like nightmares made real. The alien observers in their ships were probably laughing now. 24 humans against the galaxy's most perfect killing machines. It was not even a fair fight. But Jaewon was not looking at the creatures with fear. He was studying them the way a general studies an enemy army, looking for weaknesses, looking for patterns, looking for the thing that every predator had but never expected to meet. Another predator that was better. The Vorthan devourer took a step forward. Its massive claws left marks in the metal-hard ground. Its 6 eyes focused on the humans with the patience of something that had never known defeat. Jaewon took a step forward too. Anyo, he said in Korean. The word meant no, but it meant something else too. It meant that these creatures were about to learn something new. Something that no apex predator had ever learned before. They were about to learn what it felt like to meet something higher on the food chain. The real hunt was about to begin. But the aliens watching from above had made one critical error in their calculations. They had assumed the humans would be the prey. The Vorthan devourer had killed things on 17 different worlds. It had crushed the armies of 3 star systems and eaten the survivors. Its shell could stop weapons that melted mountains. Its claws could cut through ship hulls like paper. But it had never met anything that looked back at it the way Commander Jaewon Kim was looking at it now. The massive creature took another step forward, then stopped. Its 6 eyes blinked in confusion. Something was wrong. The small creature in front of it should be running, should be screaming, should be showing the fear that came before feeding time. Instead, the human just stood there, calm, patient, like it was waiting for something. Behind Jaewon, his crew was moving without orders. Lieutenant Eun Ji-yoon stepped left. Captain Soyeon Choi moved right. They were not running away from the predator. They were surrounding it. The devourer's primitive brain tried to understand this behavior. In 5,000 years of killing, nothing had ever tried to surround it. Nothing had ever looked at it like it was the prey instead of the predator. Engineer Minji Park knelt and picked up a piece of broken metal from the ground. It was sharp on one end and heavy on the other. Not much of a weapon against something the size of a building, but she held it like it was exactly what she needed. The creatures watching from the other climate zones grew restless. Through the energy barriers, shapes moved closer. The invisible hunters called Nexus Stalkers began to phase in and out of normal space. They were curious about this strange behavior. Dr. Hyunwoo Nam was taking notes on a piece of cloth, studying the devourer like it was a lab specimen instead of a killing machine. Compound eyes suggest limited depth perception at close range, he whispered to Dr. Subin Kang. Shell design indicates it relies on overwhelming force rather than speed. Are you analyzing our death? Technician Minho Jaeon asked. I am analyzing our advantage. The devourer lunged forward with surprising speed for something so large. Its massive claws swept through the air where Jaewon had been standing. But the human was no longer there. He had moved sideways with the smooth motion of someone who had dodged death many times before. Sergeant Jiwon-oh threw the first piece of metal. It hit the creature's shell and bounced off without leaving a mark. But it made a sound, a sharp ringing that echoed through the clearing. The devourer turned toward the sound and Jaewon moved again. This time he was closer to the creature's head. Close enough to touch the black shell. Close enough to look directly into those 6 confused eyes. You have never been hunted before, he said quietly. The words were in Korean, but somehow the meaning seemed to reach the alien creature. You do not know what it feels like. Engineer Dong-Yun Lee had found something interesting in the broken ground where other prisoners had died. Fragments of technology from dozens of different worlds. Pieces of weapons and tools and communication devices. The other species that had been thrown into this place had tried to fight with what they brought. But humans were different. Humans were born on a world where everything was trying to kill them, where the weather could freeze them solid or cook them alive, where the ground could shake apart and the sky could fall as burning rocks. They had learned to fight with whatever they could find. Pilot Hansel Baek and navigator Yuna Lee were mapping the creature's positions and movements. Not randomly, but with the precision of people who had navigated through asteroid fields and solar storms. They were turning chaos into data. The devourer has blind spots, Yuna whispered. Below and to the right. Its shell prevents it from turning quickly. The stalkers are pack hunters, Hansel added. They are waiting for the devourer to wound us before they attack. How long do we have? Communications Officer Daeun Kim asked. They will attack when they smell blood. Captain Soyeon Choi answered. So we make sure the blood is not ours. The plan formed without words. 24 humans who had trained together and fought together and survived the deep space between worlds together. They moved like a single organism with 24 parts. Engineer Taeyang Shin found the energy barrier's control frequency and began to modify it using pieces of broken alien technology. Supply Officer Gaiun Ryu distributed the metal fragments as weapons, giving the sharpest pieces to the people who knew how to use them best. Medic Seongjin Choi prepared to treat wounds that had not happened yet. But he also prepared something else. Chemical compounds that could be made from the alien plants around them. Things that would burn or explode or make breathing very difficult. The devourer attacked again, frustrated by the small creatures that would not behave like proper prey. This time all 24 humans moved at once. Not away from the attack, but into it. They swarmed over the massive creature like antibodies attacking a virus. Each human knew exactly where to go and what to do. Some attacked the joints where the shell was weakest. Others went for the eyes. A few climbed onto the creature's back where its claws could not reach. The devourer had never experienced anything like this. It was used to prey that ran or prey that fought alone. It had no defense against prey that worked together like a single hunting pack. Jaewon reached the creature's head and looked into its largest eye. What he saw there was not the mindless hunger of a simple predator. There was intelligence, ancient and alien, but real. You are not just a killer, he said. You are a survivor. You have lived for thousands of years by being the strongest thing on every world you visited. The devourer tried to shake him off, but more humans climbed up to join him. Soon the creature's head was covered with small figures who moved too fast to catch and hit too hard to ignore. But we are survivors too, Jaewon continued. We survived on a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned to work together because working alone meant death, and now we are going to teach you something new. The creature's struggles grew weaker, not because it was injured, but because it was confused. These small creatures were not trying to kill it. They were trying to communicate with it. Engineer Taeyang Shin completed his modifications to the energy barrier. Suddenly, the frequency that had kept the creatures separated began to carry something else. Sound patterns that translated between species. Chemical signals that communicated emotions across biological barriers. For the first time in the history of the proving grounds, the apex predators began to understand each other. The Nexus stalkers stopped their attack preparations. Through the barrier, they could sense something that had never existed before in this place. Not fear or hunger or the desire to kill. Cooperation. The invisible hunters began to phase fully into normal space. They were curious about these strange creatures that climbed on top of apex predators and talked to them instead of running away. In the other climate zones, more shapes gathered at the energy barriers. Things that had been alone for decades or centuries, suddenly aware that something was changing in the center of their prison. The aliens watching from their safe ships above stopped laughing. Their instruments were recording things that should have been impossible. Apex predators from different worlds standing near each other without fighting. Communication between species that had no common language. And in the center of it all, 24 humans who moved like they owned the place. Commander Jaewon Kim looked down at the Vorthan Devourer's massive eye and saw something that changed everything. The ancient creature was not looking at him with hunger anymore. It was looking at him with respect. The real awakening had begun. But it was not the humans who were waking up to their situation. It was the apex predators who were waking up to what humans really were. 3 weeks had passed since the humans entered the proving grounds and nothing was the same. The alien observers in their ships above watched in growing horror as their perfect killing machine transformed into something they had never imagined possible. Commander Jaewon Kim stood on top of a crystal formation that gave him a clear view of the entire central zone. Around him, creatures that should have been trying to eat each other were working together like they had been partners for years. The Vorthan Devourer had become something like a mobile base. Its massive shell now carried supplies and equipment that the humans had built from the wreckage of previous prisoners. Engineer Minji Park had figured out how to hollow out sections of the shell without hurting the creature. Inside those spaces, they stored food, water, and weapons. But the most amazing thing was not what the humans had built. It was how the other creatures had responded. The Nexus stalkers, invisible hunters that could move between dimensions, had started bringing gifts. Strange fruits from the forest zones, metals from the desert areas, things that could be turned into tools or medicine or better weapons. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-yoon had learned to communicate with them using hand signals and chemical markers that Dr. Subin Kang had developed. The stalkers were curious about everything the humans did. They watched when engineer Dong-hyun Lee built new devices. They listened when technician Min Ho-jeon explained how human technology worked. They are learning from us, Captain Soyeon Choi observed. But we are learning from them too. The stalkers could phase through solid matter, but they had taught the humans how to predict where they would appear. In return, the humans had shown them how to use tools and work as a coordinated team instead of just a pack. Dr. Hyun-woo Nam had made the most important discovery 3 days earlier. He had been studying the dome's ecosystem when he noticed something strange about the energy barriers. They were not just keeping different zones separate. They were collecting data. Every time a creature crosses between zones, the barriers record information, he explained to the group. Movement patterns, behavior changes, survival rates. Someone is studying us. The aliens who built this place, Jaewon said. They are not just containing dangerous creatures. They are preparing them for something. Engineer Taeyang Shin had spent weeks analyzing the dome's power systems and communication networks. What he found made everyone stop and listen carefully. This is not just a prison, he announced. It is a training facility. The aliens are breeding super predators. They take the most dangerous creatures from across the galaxy and put them here to make them even more dangerous. Training them for what? Pilot Hansel Baek asked. War, Communications Officer Daeun Kim said quietly. She had been intercepting alien transmissions for days. They are planning to invade worlds that refuse to join their empire. These creatures are their secret weapons. The implications hit everyone at once. The proving grounds was not about justice or punishment. It was about creating an army of nightmares that could destroy any planet that resisted alien control. But now the weapons were learning to think for themselves. And they were learning from humans. Sergeant G10 had established patrol routes with creatures from 7 different worlds. A pack of wolf-like hunters from an ice planet worked with crystal beings that could control electricity. Flying predators from a gas giant coordinated with underground diggers from a heavy-gravity world. None of these species had ever cooperated before. On their homeworlds, they had been apex predators with no natural enemies and no need to work with others. But humans had shown them something new: the power of the pack. "We are not the strongest," Medic Seongjin Choi had explained to a group of the smaller predators. He was treating an injury on a creature that looked like a living shadow. "We are not the fastest or the deadliest, but we work together. We help each other survive." The shadow creature had never experienced medical care before. On its homeworld, injured animals died alone. But here, other creatures gathered around to watch as Seongjin cleaned and bandaged wounds with materials that supply. Officer Geun Ryu had found in different climate zones. Navigator. Yoona Lee had mapped the entire dome and discovered something that changed their understanding of everything. There were not just climate zones arranged in a circle. There were layers, above them and below them, connected by hidden passages and energy lifts. "The dome is much bigger than we thought," she reported. "There are at least 12 levels, each one containing different types of creatures. We are on the middle level." "What is on the other levels?" Jaewon asked. "Things that are too dangerous even for this place." The answer came 2 days later when the aliens made their next mistake. Believing that the humans were somehow controlling the creatures through hidden technology, they decided to escalate the situation. If smaller predators were not enough to kill the humans, they would try something bigger. The energy barriers around the central zone suddenly expanded, connecting them to lift systems that the humans had not known existed. From deep below the dome, something began to rise. Engineer Woo-Jin Kim was the first to detect it on the instruments he had built from salvaged alien technology. "Something big is coming up from the lower levels," he announced. "Mass readings are off the scale." The creatures around them began to act strangely. The Vorthan Devourer, which had been calm for weeks, suddenly became agitated. The Nexus stalkers started phasing in and out of normal space rapidly, like they were trying to escape something. Even the most aggressive predators backed away from the lift shaft as it rose through the floor of the central zone. What could scare apex predators? Tactical Officer Kyungmin Ha asked. "Something that eats apex predators," Counselor Jeon Moon answered. She had been studying the social dynamics of their growing alliance. "The aliens are bringing up their ultimate weapon." The lift stopped with a sound like breaking mountains. The containment field around it flickered and went out. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the darkness inside the lift began to move. The creature that emerged was unlike anything in the files or the stories or the nightmares of a dozen worlds. It was not just big or strong or fast. It was perfect. Evolution had crafted it over millions of years to be the ultimate predator. Its body absorbed energy weapons. Its claws could cut through any material. Its intelligence was ancient and completely focused on one thing. But the most terrifying thing about it was not its physical abilities. It was the way every other creature in the dome reacted to its presence. Even the Vorthan Devourer, a creature that feared nothing, began to back away. The Omega species had destroyed entire civilizations. Planets had been abandoned just to get away from it. Whole star systems had been declared forbidden zones because one of these creatures lived there. The aliens watching from above were sure that this would finally end their human problem. The Omega species had never shown mercy to any living thing. It killed until nothing was left, then moved on to find more things to kill. The massive creature looked around the central zone with eyes that held the memories of 1,000 dead worlds. It saw the humans and their allied predators. It smelled the scent of cooperation and mutual aid. Then it did something that shattered every assumption about apex predators in the known galaxy. It looked directly at Commander Jaewon Kim and slowly, carefully lowered its head. The gesture was unmistakable across every culture and species. The ultimate predator, the creature that had never bowed to anything in millions of years of existence, was showing respect to a human. Field Specialist Seung-ho An whispered what everyone was thinking. "It recognizes us." "Recognizes us as what?" someone asked. Jaewon stepped forward and placed his hand on the Omega species' massive head. The creature that could have destroyed planets allowed itself to be touched by something a fraction of its size. As the pack leaders it has been waiting for. The real pack was forming now. Not just the creatures from this level of the dome, but something that included the ultimate predator itself. And at the center of it all, 24 humans who had turned a death sentence into a kingdom. The aliens had wanted to create the perfect weapons. Instead, they had created the perfect army. And they had just handed control of it to the species they feared most. The dragon had found its tamers. Now it was time to show the galaxy what dragons could do when they had proper leadership. The transformation was complete, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans really were. Commander Jaewon Kim stood at the center of what had once been a death trap, and was now something the universe had never seen before. Around him, creatures from nightmares worked together like they had been family for centuries. The Omega species had changed everything. When the ultimate predator accepted human leadership, every other creature in the dome understood that the old rules no longer applied. The age of endless killing was over. The age of cooperation had begun. Engineer Minji Park had spent the last week working with creatures whose homeworlds she could not even pronounce. Together, they had turned the dome's defensive systems into tools of construction. Force fields that had once trapped prisoners now formed walkways between levels. Energy barriers that had separated enemies now connected allies. The dome was designed to contain chaos, she explained to Dr. Hyunwoo Nam as they watched. A group of crystal beings helped some shadow creatures build a communication tower. But we have turned it into order. The most amazing change was in the creatures themselves. Species that had been alone for decades or centuries were learning to trust again. The Nexus Stalkers, who had been invisible hunters, now worked openly with others. They used their dimension-shifting abilities to scout new areas and carry messages between groups. Lieutenant Yoon had established communication protocols that worked across completely different forms of life. Chemical signals for creatures that spoke through scent, light patterns for beings that communicated with colors, sound frequencies that could reach species with hearing far beyond human range. We are not just talking to them, she told Tactical Officer Kyung-min Ha. We are teaching them to talk to each other. Captain Soyeon Choi had organized the greatest military force in galactic history. Creatures that could phase through solid matter worked with others that could survive in deep space. Flying hunters coordinated with underground diggers. Predators that absorbed energy weapons partnered with others that could generate their own power. But the real breakthrough had come when Counselor Jeon Moon made a discovery that changed how they understood everything. They were not just apex predators on their home worlds, she announced to the group. They were leaders. Every single creature here was the dominant intelligence on their planet. The implications were staggering. The aliens had not just collected dangerous animals. They had kidnapped the natural rulers of hundreds of worlds. Kings and queens and emperor predators who had guided the evolution of entire ecosystems. No wonder they had responded so well to human leadership. They recognized what humans were because they were the same thing. Natural-born leaders who had evolved to organize complex systems and make hard decisions. Engineer Dong-Yun Lee had been studying the dome's data collection systems. What he found made everyone understand why the aliens had been so careful to monitor everything that happened here. They are not just training weapons, he reported. They are studying leadership itself. They want to know how apex predators think and make decisions. They are trying to understand what makes a perfect ruler, so they can replace the rulers of worlds they want to conquer. Dr. Subin Kang added, kill the natural leaders and put their own creatures in charge. But now those creatures had learned something that the aliens had never expected. They had learned that there was something better than ruling through fear. They had learned to rule through cooperation. Technician Minho Jian had been monitoring alien communications from the ships above. The conversations he intercepted were full of panic and confusion. They are calling emergency sessions across the galaxy, he reported. Some species want to destroy the dome and everything in it. Others are trying to negotiate. Negotiate for what? Pilot Hansel Bike asked. Our surrender. The idea made everyone laugh. Surrender to the people who had thrown them into a death trap and expected them to die quietly. The aliens still did not understand what they were dealing with. Navigator Unilee had mapped every level of the dome and made contact with creatures from places that had no names. The dome contained representatives from over 800 different worlds. Each one was the apex predator from their home system. Each one was now part of the alliance that humans had created. We are not prisoners anymore, she observed. We are the government of a multi-species empire that happens to be contained in a dome. Field Specialist Seung-ho, An had been studying the dome's construction and found something that changed all their plans. The dome was not just a prison or a training facility. It was a weapon platform. It could move through space like a ship. It could land on planets like an invasion force. They built it to carry their super predators to target worlds, he explained. Drop the dome on a planet, release the creatures and let them destroy everything. Then send in their own forces to clean up. But now the weapon belongs to us, communications expert Da-Hyun Chai added. She had been intercepting deeper alien communications, and they are terrified of what we might do with it. The answer came when Jaewon made a decision that would echo through galactic history for thousands of years. Standing on the highest crystal formation in the dome, surrounded by creatures that could destroy planets, he activated every communication system in the facility. His voice reached every alien ship in orbit. It reached every alien world in the galaxy. It reached species that had never heard human language before but understood the tone of absolute authority. People of the galaxy, he said in Korean, while the dome's translation systems carried his words to every language in known space. You tried to judge us without understanding us. You threw us into your trap expecting us to die quietly. You made one mistake. Around him, 800 apex predators moved into formation. Each one was a living weapon capable of destroying armies. Each one now followed human leadership. You assumed we were like you. You assumed we would use strength only for destruction and dominance. You never imagined that strength could be used to build instead of break, to unite instead of divide. The Omega species moved to stand beside him. The creature that had destroyed civilizations now served as proof that even the ultimate predator could choose cooperation over conquest. We have spent the last month building something you said was impossible. A society where apex predators work together, where natural enemies become allies, where competition becomes cooperation. In the ships above, alien commanders were calculating how many weapons it would take to break through the dome's defenses, how many ships they would need to destroy what the humans had created. But we are not just going to tell you about this new way of living, Jaewon continued. We are going to show you. Engineer Taeyang Shin activated the systems that would free them from their prison. But they were not just escaping. They were taking the entire dome with them. All 800 apex predators, all the technology and knowledge and power that the aliens had spent centuries collecting. You wanted to use us as weapons against worlds that refused to bow to your empire. Instead, we are going to offer those worlds something better. Protection, alliance, partnership. The dome began to move through space under its own power, guided by human navigation and defended by creatures that had never known defeat. It was no longer a prison or a weapon. It was the mobile capital of a new kind of civilization, one where strength served wisdom instead of greed, where predators protected instead of destroyed. The galaxy is about to change, Jaewon announced as they left the orbit of the tribunal world behind them. We are going to visit every planet that has ever been threatened by your empire. We are going to offer them a choice. Join us willingly as equals and allies, or face what happens when apex predators finally find a cause worth fighting for. Behind them, the alien fleets scrambled to follow, but they were chasing something that moved faster than any ship, defended by creatures that could not be killed, and led by humans who had turned impossible into inevitable. The hunters had become the guardians. The weapons had become protectors, and the species that the galaxy feared most had revealed their true nature. They were not conquerors, they were liberators. The Alpha had emerged, and the galaxy would never be the same. 1 year later, Commander Jaewon Kim stood in the same crystal courtroom where he had been sentenced to death. But this time he was not in chains. This time, the alien judges looked up at him with something they had never shown before. The transformation of the galaxy had been swift and complete. The mobile dome had visited over 300 worlds in the first 6 months. Each planet had been given the same choice that Jaewon had promised. Join the alliance willingly or face the consequences. Most had chosen to join, not because they feared the apex predators that traveled with the humans, but because they had never been offered true partnership before. The alien empire had always ruled through fear and domination. The humans offered something different. They offered hope. Engineer Minji Park had established trade networks that connected species from opposite sides of the galaxy. Creatures that had been mortal enemies for millennia now shared technology and resources. The Nexus Stalkers used their dimension-shifting abilities to carry messages and goods instantly across impossible distances, Captain Soyeon Choi had created a defense force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. When the Empire's fleets attacked worlds that had joined the human alliance, they found themselves facing coordinated resistance from creatures they had never imagined working together. The Vorthan Devourer had learned to carry evacuation pods in its shell, rescuing civilians from war zones. Flying predators from gas giants worked with deep space creatures to intercept invasion fleets before they could reach populated worlds. But the most powerful change was not military. It was social. Dr. Hyunwoo Nam had established research stations on dozens of worlds where species that had never met before worked together on projects that benefited everyone. Medicine developed on ice worlds helped creatures from desert planets. Technology from crystal beings improved life for shadow creatures who lived in different dimensions. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-yoon had become the galaxy's first interspecies diplomat. She spoke 43 different alien languages and could communicate with creatures that had no language at all. Her translation protocols had made it possible for the Galactic Senate to include representatives from species that had never been able to participate before. The old empire had been built on the idea that strength meant taking what you wanted from others. The new alliance was built on the idea that strength meant helping others take what they needed from the universe itself. Engineer Dong-yeon. Lee had turned asteroid mining into an art form by working with creatures that could survive in deep space and others that could manipulate gravity. Food production had increased by 3,000% when desert creatures shared their knowledge with jungle species technician. Min Hyo-jeon had created entertainment networks that connected billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. For the first time in galactic history, different species were learning about each other's cultures, art, and music instead of just their weaknesses. The economic changes had been just as dramatic. Supply Officer Gaeon Ryu had organized trade routes that made every world richer, instead of making a few worlds powerful at the expense of others. When creatures shared their unique abilities freely, everyone benefited. Pilot Hansel Baek had established a transportation network that could move people and goods across the galaxy in days instead of years. Nexus stalkers working with quantum tunnel creatures had made interstellar travel as easy as walking to a neighbor's house. Navigator Yuna. Lee had mapped regions of space that had been considered too dangerous to explore. Working with creatures that could survive in the hearts of stars or the cold between galaxies, she had opened up new frontiers for expansion and discovery. But the real revolution was happening in places that could not be measured or mapped. In the hearts and minds of beings who had lived their entire lives believing that survival meant being stronger than everyone else. Medic Seong-jin. Choi had established hospitals on every alliance world where creatures from different species worked together to heal injuries and cure diseases. Predators that had once eaten their wounded now carried them to safety. Apex hunters became healers and teachers. Counselor Ji-yeon Moon had created educational systems that taught young beings from all species to work together from the moment they were old enough to learn. Children who would have grown up to be enemies now played together and shared ideas that their parents never could have imagined. The psychological impact had been the most profound change of all. For the first time in their history, apex predators across the galaxy had something more satisfying than domination. They had purpose. They had family. They had a cause worth living for instead of just things worth killing for. Sergeant Ji-won Oh had become the commander of integrated defense forces where creatures from enemy species served together in the same units. Warriors who had spent centuries trying to kill each other now fought side by side to protect civilians they had never met. Field Specialist Sung-ho An had turned the mobile dome into a traveling capital that visited every world in the Alliance at least once per year. Local leaders could meet directly with the creatures and humans who had created the new galaxy. They could see for themselves that cooperation really was possible. Communications expert Dayun Chai had established news networks that carried stories of success and hope to every corner of known space. Instead of propaganda about the strength of empires, beings now heard stories about the power of working together. Tactical Officer Kyungmin had created training programs where military leaders from different worlds learned to coordinate defenses and share intelligence. The old empire's strategy of dividing enemies against each other no longer worked when all the enemies had become friends. Engineer Woojin Kim had converted weapons factories into manufacturing. Centers that built tools for construction instead of destruction. Planets that had spent their resources on armies now used them to build schools, hospitals, and research centers. Engineer Taeyang Shin had connected the power grids of entire star systems, allowing worlds with excess energy to share with those that needed it. The cooperation between species had made it possible to build projects on a scale that no single world could have. Managed alone, the aliens who had originally judged humanity sat in their crystal chairs and tried to understand what had happened to their galaxy. Half of their empire had joined the human alliance voluntarily. The other half was demanding the same rights and freedoms that alliance worlds enjoyed. The three-headed judge that had sentenced Jaewon to death now looked at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. The middle head with 6 blue eyes spoke first. "Commander Kim Jaewon of the human species," it said. "The Galactic Tribunal acknowledges that our original judgment was incomplete." The bird-like judge on the left added, "Your species has demonstrated capabilities that our initial assessment did not account for." The third judge, with no eyes at all, spoke last. "We did not anticipate that apex predators could be transformed into something else." Jaewon looked around the courtroom. The same seats that had once been filled with aliens demanding human blood now held representatives from 800 different worlds. Creatures that had been enemies for millions of years sat next to each other and discussed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. "You are right," he said. "Your assessment was incomplete. You looked at humans and saw another species to be controlled or eliminated. You never imagined that we might be something different. What are you?" The middle judge asked. Jaewon smiled. Behind him, the Omega species waited patiently. The ultimate predator had become his advisor and friend. Around the courtroom, creatures that could destroy planets served as ambassadors and teachers and healers. "We are what evolution creates when a species survives by learning to work together instead of fighting alone," he said. "We are what happens when apex predators discover something better than domination." Which is what? Leadership. True leadership. The kind that makes others stronger instead of weaker. The kind that builds instead of destroys. The kind that creates families instead of enemies. The courtroom fell silent. Through the crystal walls, they could see the mobile dome floating in space above the tribunal world. Inside it, 800 species were working together to build a civilization that would have been impossible just 1 year before. "The galaxy tried to judge us," Jaewon continued. "But in the end, we judged ourselves. And we decided to become something better than what you feared we were." "What happens now?" the eyeless judge asked. "Now you have the same choice we offered everyone else. Join us as equals or remain as you are and watch the galaxy change around you." "And if we refuse?" Jaewon looked at the creatures around him. Apex predators who had chosen to become protectors. Ultimate hunters who had decided to become builders. The most dangerous beings in the galaxy, who now use their power to help instead of harm. Then you will be left behind, not destroyed, not conquered, just irrelevant. The transformation was complete. The humans had been tossed into the dragon's lair, and had emerged as something the galaxy had never seen before. Not dragon slayers, not dragon masters, dragon whisperers, beings who could look into the heart of the most dangerous creatures in the universe and help them find their better nature. The true power had been revealed. It was not the power to destroy or dominate or control.